Welcome to the 2025 K-State Garden Webinar Series. We're so glad that you're here. This webinar series started in 2020 and has been a collaboration of the entire K-State Horticulture Extension team. Since the start of the program, we've reached over 83,000 gardeners just like you. We're pleased to continue offering the K-State Garden Hour service for free. If you've enjoyed these educational webinars, please consider making a tax-deductible donation to support this program. The link to donate can be found in the chat or on our K-State Garden Hour website. This webinar is hosted by K-State Research and Extension. My name is Laura Phillips, and I'm the Horticulture Agent for the Meadowlark District, which is Jackson, Jefferson, and Nemaha County, Kansas. Everyone involved in the development of this series is an extension professional for K-State. Most of us have a background in horticultural education or related discipline. But most of all, we each have a love for gardening and education and sharing important topics. I love this series personally because we get to connect with gardeners across the state, sometimes across the globe, and learn something new each month. Now, before we get started, we do have a couple of housekeeping notes to cover. Please use the Q&A feature for questions related to the presentation. This is where we will look for questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. You should see a button up along the bottom tab that says Q&A. If you click on that, you will be able to enter your questions. Today's webinar will be recorded and we'll post it on our K-State Garden Hour website. We typically upload additional resources related to the topic as well. If we share any links to the chat, those links will also be uploaded to the website. Our website is also where you can access previous topics and upcoming topics in the series. Today, we will cover methods to increase vegetable yields, and I'm pleased to introduce today's speaker, Abbey Draut, the horticulture agent in Sedgwick County. Now, please give us a few moments while we transition and share the presentation slides.
Just getting set up here. How's everything look?
Looks good, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Well, hello everyone. My name is Abbey Draut. Like the dry spell we're in, just spelled a little different. So I keep saying this is the year everyone learns to say my last name. I'm a horticulture agent in Sedgwick County with K-State Research and Extension. And today we're going to talk about methods to increasing vegetable yields. So my method today is to kind of focus on how healthy plants are always going to produce more. And achieving that requires a mix of good practices, kind of like proper watering, weeding, mulching, soil management, and overall plant maintenance. So whether you're a beginner with us today or an experienced gardener, hopefully these methods will help you grow more food more efficiently. And so real quick, let's look at the poll. I was looking at the poll here. It looks like for question 1, which of the following is not a method of optimizing soil health in a home vegetable garden? Looks like most of you got that right, saying that plant the same crops in the same spot every year. So we definitely don't want to be doing that. That's going to promote disease. And then also pests, they're going to learn that those squash are in the same spot every year and they're going to be looking for them. Number 2, which factor is least important to consider when selecting vegetable varieties? Plant and fruit appearance, yeah. So looks like everyone was on board with that one. Although we want them to look good, you want to have good heat tolerance, disease resistance, and good local yield performance. And then what is the ideal soil pH range for most vegetable gardens? Most people said 5.5 to 7.0, which is correct. You know, there are some that do like a little more acidic, like potatoes like a little more acidic, and then some that do like a little more alkaline, like asparagus. So, but our general range is between 5.5 and 7.0. So thank you for filling that out. It's good to know kind of where we're starting off here in the presentation. So methods I'm going to cover today. First, I want to talk about how to select high performing varieties. And then we're going to kind of build on that and go into how to prep your bed. So optimizing your soil, because healthy soil promote healthy plants, and healthy plants just produce more. And then how to fertilize by specific crops, watering wisely and timely, because Some of us are in a drought, and so those are just things we need to be conscientious about. How to deal with mulch and suppress weeds so that they don't interfere with um, your planted varieties that you want to be successful and productive. And then just a tiny bit about how to prevent and manage pests and diseases. So let's get started. First, we're going to talk about selecting high performing varieties. And some things to consider up front are, looking at disease resistance, insect tolerance, weather adaptability, and the overall yield potential. If you want a bountiful harvest, it's essential to select plants suited also to your growing conditions for where you're at. Plus, you also want to take into consideration like flavor, color, and texture because those things matter. You're going to eat them, right? Or you're going to use them in dishes. And then also consider the size and space of your garden and what you actually have room for, because you don't want to crowd your plants super close together. They're not going to be terribly productive in that way if they're fighting for space in the soil and above, or you don't have good air movement between, and then you're kind of inviting insect and pest disease problems there. We'll also talk about when you're looking at seed packages and online at catalogs and stuff, like what days to maturity means, and then just a little bit on the difference of how heirlooms and hybrids function. So you're planting your garden and you're looking at what seeds you're going to buy for the year for your vegetable garden. And so we want to think about at that time disease resistance. Plants that have better disease resistance are going to perform better and be more productive. And so when you're shopping for seeds, you might notice these codes on the packet in catalogs or on websites. But what do they mean? So today we're going to talk about how important these disease resistant codes are and what they mean. So choosing disease resistant plants can make a huge difference in the garden, like I said, and these codes indicate the diseases a plant is naturally resistant to, which can help you avoid making common plant problems and grow a healthier harvest. So let's go over some of the codes on here. So V stands for verticillium wilt resistance. F is for fusarium wilt resistance, and you can see in this picture over here, this is a disease resistance code listing from the Johnny's website, which is a common place to buy seeds from, and they list them right on the website here. And so they say F, LB, or EB. So you can see down here, EB means early blight and LB means late blight. You may see some longer ones like TSWV, which is going to stand for tomato spotted wilt virus, or S, which is septoria leaf spot. You'll commonly see a lot of these listed on especially tomato varieties, since they are so susceptible to lots of different diseases, especially early blight, late blight, and the tomato spotted wilt virus. So it's good to look out for these codes as you're shopping around, whether that's online or in catalogs or in the store, and just be aware of what these mean. And this is just a small sampling of what some of those mean. There are lots of other variations. Hopefully, if you're online, they generally tell you what that means. If it just has a letter code on there, you may not get that if you're shopping in the store, but catalogs tend to tell you as well. So just something to be aware of and look out for when shopping for seeds is to think about disease resistance so that you're starting with strong plants in the beginning. Next, you'll see on the seed packages or wherever you're shopping, days to maturity or DTM, or sometimes it'll just say days on the package or in the catalogs. And what that means is that it's the days of maturity from when it was either direct seeded or from when it was transplanted. So direct seeded is the number of days from when you planted that seed in the ground. And transplanted is the number of days from when you transplant seedlings into the garden. And understanding this difference is pretty crucial to planning your timing of when you're going to seed your plants either indoors or outside. It's going to help you plan around the length of your growing season. It's going to help you determine the best time to start your seeds inside and make more informed choices when you're selecting your crop varieties as well. So let's say you have a variety of tomatoes and it has a days to maturity of 80 days, just to give an example here. If you direct seed that, you're going to be harvesting in about 80 days. If you're going to transplant those after 30 days indoors, you'll only have about 50 days to wait to be able to harvest after transplanting. So when you're buying your seed, check that days to maturity and consider things like your local growing season length, whether you'll start your seeds indoors or direct seed outside, and then staggering your plantings for a longer harvest to get more produce. And just know that a little planting can go a long way in maximizing your potential. Now, heirlooms, let's talk a little bit about the difference between heirlooms and hybrids. So when you're selecting varieties, you'll see the difference here, but what does that mean and how does that affect your garden? So heirlooms are varieties that have been passed down for generations and valued for good flavor and unique characteristics. They tend to offer things like, exceptional flavor, unique colors and shapes. I love heirloom tomatoes because I love the different shapes of them, especially all the ribbed varieties. They have tender skin and flesh, but they also have some problems. So they come with, they're a little less disease resistant. They tend to be a little lower yielding, and they tend to be a little later fruiting, which means a longer wait for your harvest. Now looking at hybrids, they're intentionally crossbred to enhance certain traits, which makes them a pretty popular choice if you're looking for high yielding varieties, which is what we're talking about today. And that's because they provide consistent and uniform size, shape, and color. They're generally have good disease resistance and tolerance. They have more compact plant habits and traits, and reliable quality and performance. And so some people like to plant a little bit of both. So if you're looking at hybrid varieties and one is a little more earlier producer, let's say for tomatoes, and then one is a later producer, you can plant the hybrids first, get those going, and then you get a good harvest there. And then as those maybe start to slow down from the heat, and your heirlooms are still producing, and then you have that later crop coming on. So you don't have to choose one or the other. You can definitely use both to increase your yields in your vegetable garden. So I wanted to touch on where to find a list, because I think hopefully in the Q&A, it's not too bad yet, but I'm sure people are wondering, where can I find a list of, high yielding varieties? And that's kind of a tricky question, because it's really variable. And it's variable because it's based off of your zone, available research, your location, what's been researched, what's been through trials, what's not been through trials. So kind of the best starting place to find a list or to figure out what works best in your area is to check with local greenhouses and nurseries and what they're growing and recommending, or your extension office can try to recommend suitable varieties to your area. K-State, we do have a publication that has recommended vegetable varieties on it, and I know some of those are out of date, but some of them are still, you can still find them, and there are still great selections. But the problem with that is it's not always updated regularly. So it's good still to kind of use your other local resources. And then, if you do get a list, do some of your own research. So look online from vegetable distributors, from seed distributors, and see what those varieties say. See if they say they're high yielding varieties, if it's something you're wanting to grow. And then, talk to Talk to your other local sources like your fellow gardeners. If you got a neighbor next door and he's constantly trying to give away cucumbers, ask him what kind of cucumber he's growing if you're trying to grow a lot, or you're trying to do some sort of pickling and you need a ton of cucumbers. So unfortunately, we don't have a well-compiled list to just hand you and say, here you go, do that and put these out, and then you're going to have a bountiful harvest. It does take a little bit of extra work on your part to do some research and figure that out, but that'll make you more successful in the end to have tailored varieties that do well in your area. So we're going to move on now and talk about soil. So again, the overall theme is that healthy plants produce a bountiful harvest. So, and that all starts with our soil here. And so what does soil provide plants? Well, it provides anchorage, nutrients, water, and oxygen, which is just about everything a plant needs to survive and thrive. And so maybe you're wondering, what is the soil made of? Well, soil consists of both mineral and organic components, both essential for maintaining its health. So the mineral component, which is 45% of the overall composition of the soil, is made up of different particle sizes that influence the soil's properties and how well it supports plant life. And then the mineral portion of soil includes three main components, and that's going to be sand, silt, and clay. So sand has large particles that provide drainage but hold few nutrients. And then silt, those are medium-sized particles that improve moisture retention. And then you have clay, and that's the smallest particle, and which holds nutrients well, but it does not drain slowly. And if you live here in Kansas in like an HOA or a newer neighborhood, you have a lot of clay and you understand this. And then the balance of these components, all of those, the ratio of those together determines the soil texture. And so soil texture refers to that relative proportion of that sand, silt, and clay out of that 45% that's minerals there. And then we have 5% of the soil composition is organic matter. And the organic portion of the soil includes decomposed plants and animal materials. And we're going to talk a little more about organic material here in a minute. And then the other 50% is what fills in that pore space, which is air and then water. So a little more about soil texture and how it influences soil. It influences by drainage is influenced by that. So like sandy soils, they're going to drain quickly, while heavy soils retain lots of water. It affects nutrient availability. Clay soils hold nutrients longer, while sandy soils lose them quickly. And it affects workability. So loamy soils, for example, a balanced mix, those are easier to work with. And knowing your soil texture can help improve plant health through amendments and proper watering. And there are techniques to like checking your soil at home. There's some at-home tests you can do, or you can do the soil web survey is another way to check that. And so this chart right here just kind of goes over the different types of soils and how texture affects them. So like the water holding capacity of a sandy soil is very low. That water just falls right through there because those are large sized particles. Loam soil, you get a little bit better drainage through that. It's nice and slow and medium. And then clay soil, drainage is really bad. It's very, very slow. And then aeration is super low because those are really, really tiny particles. So this can be found in the Kansas Garden Guide. And a lot of tables I'll go through today. You guys can find those in there. This is a great resource just to kind of walk you through some of the basics of soil and how that affects your vegetable gardens. So talking a little more about organic matter, remember that's made up of decomposed plant and animal materials, and it has a lot of functions within the soil, even though it only makes up 5% of the overall composition. So it does things like improve soil structure by loosening tight clay, provides for better soil aeration, which is necessary for plant growth or for root growth. It's going to increase that water holding capacity, especially in sandy soil. So like we just said, sandy soils don't have great water holding capacity because those are large particle sized um, aggregates inside the soil. And then it's going to make soil easier to till and easier for plant roots to penetrate it. And it provides extra nutrients for plant growth, like supporting beneficial microorganisms. And then, adding like just organic matter is amazing. And adding compost or mulch helps maintain healthy soil by boosting that organic matter. And so here are some of the materials if you're going to add organic matter into your vegetable garden after you've done a soil test, or if you haven't done a soil test, these are recommendations, but I'd recommend doing a soil test so you kind of know where you're sitting. But some of the materials you can add are like stable manure, poultry and sheep manure, compost, and cattle manure. And so, enhancing soil with organic matter is a reliable method for improving all soil types. Um, in nearly all cases, incorporating organic matter into the garden area is highly recommended. So for optimal soil health, it's beneficial to add organic matter regularly, and typically every 1 to 3 years. Um, Something to be aware of is like consistently adding manure and compost can significantly increase soil nutrient levels over time. So doing a regular soil test is essential to monitor nutrient and organic matter levels. Excessive organic matter and nutrients can sometimes reduce yields in certain crops, like such as tomatoes and their relatives. So if you suspect this issue, be sure to include organic matter and nitrogen levels in your soil test. And if you're getting a soil test with K-State Research and Extension, if you're here in Kansas and have access to an extension office, we do those, and our general gardener's package will cover that. It'll cover your NPK, pH, and your organic matter, so it's already tested. So a couple comments on if you're using uncomposted manure, like what's listed on this table here, be aware that it can introduce harmful microbes. And that could potentially lead to causing foodborne illnesses. So applying raw manure in the fall provides sufficient time for that to decompose before planting your crops. And if a fall application isn't doable, add it no more than 120 days before harvest, like at a very minimum, just to reduce the risk of introducing those foodborne illnesses. And then other ways to increase your organic matter. I know this is getting pretty popular and a lot of people are going this route, which I think it's great, is to do no-till. And so some benefits of no-till, and if you don't know what no-till is, sorry, it preserves the natural structure of the soil, preventing compaction and allowing roots to grow freely. It also enhances water filtration and retention and reduces the need for frequent irrigation. It increases soil fertility also, which is awesome. It provides beneficial microbes, fungi, and earthworms, an area to thrive in that is undisturbed, and contributes to nutrient cycling and healthier plants. So organic matter, like compost or mulch, gradually breaks down, and then that enriches the soil with more nutrients. It reduces erosion and runoff, and that means it's keeping soil covered with mulch, and cover crop protects it from wind and water erosion. And then it also is going to reduce that surface runoff, keeping valuable soil and nutrients in place. It's also going to increase water retention and soil moisture, which is great. It's going to suppress weeds, and it's going to enhance the overall biodiversity of the soil by supporting a diverse ecosystem of soil organisms, which improves plant and health resilience. So no-till has lots and lots of benefits to it. And all we're going to talk about is this one slide today, but look into it if you're interested in doing more, but it definitely has lots and lots of upsides for maintaining healthy soils. And then also kind of going in with no-till is cover crops. Those can increase organic matter as well. and they support a healthy garden ecosystem, just like no-till crops. They offer numerous benefits such as increasing organic matter, nutrients, improving the soil structure, and improving drainage, reducing erosion, recycling nutrients, enhancing that fertility, and suppressing weeds. So lots of good reasons to use cover crops. And additionally, some of those cover crops will provide food for pollinators and other beneficial insects when they bloom. So just an added benefit there. Now, a few things to keep in mind about if you're going to use cover crops is that they do require some management. And it's important to select varieties that are suited to your garden needs and to plant them at the right time and to have necessary tools and properly terminate them before planting your vegetables. Often if they're left unmanaged or allowed to grow too long, some of those cover crops can become weeds instead of a beneficial crop. And so when we talk about termination, cover crops should be terminated about 2 to 4 weeks before planting to allow for proper decomposition. And there are a couple ways to do this. Common ways, are like mowing or rowing and crimping the cover crop into the ground. You can use herbicide, you can use a rototiller, or you can use any combination of those options there. But just make sure that you terminate it about 2 to 4 weeks before you plan on planting so that it does have time to break down. Now, there are some crops when you get to looking at different varieties that are going to naturally die off due to winter frost. But to prevent the unwanted seeding and potential weed issues, be sure to terminate the crop before it sets seed. Like I said, 2 to 4 weeks before, or kind of like around when 50% of the plants are in bloom. So now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about soil pH and nutrient availability. And then this is going to kind of round out our section on optimizing health here. And so soil pH measures acidity or alkalinity with levels with most plants thriving in a pretty balanced range. Like I said, most vegetables are in that 5.5 to 7 range there, with some of them liking it a little more acidic and some liking it just a little bit more alkaline. And so extreme pH levels, which can be common in Kansas, here in Sedgwick County, I regularly get vegetable samples back, soil tests back, and they're 7.3 to 7.5, and in the extreme range is 8 or above. So that can just, this chart is showing here that can make plant nutrients unavailable when it's not in a specific range or when the pH is too high or too low. And since we have primary macronutrients like nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, it's really good to keep that soil pH within an optimum range so that those nutrients are available to plants during the growing season. And so here's a chart that shows the optimum ranges of pHs for various vegetables here. And like I said, you can see on here that it really ranges. Potatoes down there at the bottom are from 5.0 to 6.5. That's a pretty big swing. And then asparagus, beets, cabbage, and muskmelons, 6.0 to 8.0. So it's going to vary by crop. It's going to fall somewhere in between 5.5 and 7.0 though. And doing a soil test, when you do one of those, they should ask you what crops you're growing so that when you get them back, your recommendations can tell you exactly kind of what range you should be shooting for, and then how to amend your soil appropriately so that it is well prepared for whatever you're planting. And so if you get your soil test back and your soil pH is super high and you need to be lower, you're going to add lime. So lime is going to decrease. And then these charts in here, these are just recommendations. You'll want to definitely do a soil test and then do what the soil test says. But if you didn't do one and you just kind of need a recommendation of where to start, this will tell you how much to add per 100 square feet per whatever type of soil you tend to have. So if it's sandy, loam, or clay, and you know that your soil test came back really high and you need to drop it down, you can add 11 pounds in a sandy soil of groundstone lime to 100 square feet. And then same here for lowering your pH. And this is often my recommendations when I get soil tests back, because like I said, I get them back and they're often 7.3 to 7.5. So we're always recommending people add sulfur to their soil to lower that pH down. So if you're at the 7.5 range, and let's say you have a loam soil, you're going to want to add 2 pounds of sulfur to 100 square feet of garden space there to drop that on down to about 7. Okay, so we've gone through the soils. You've done your soil test, you know what you need to do, you've done your amendments and all that. So now and you've picked out your crop selections, your varieties. So now we're going to talk about, the next method to increasing your yield is to fertilize by crop and their crop needs. So get my screen to go here. Just some real quick fertilizer basics. So the macronutrients that most vegetables are going to need are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and sometimes sulfur, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. And sulfur you're going to add probably anyway if you're in Kansas and you did a soil test and you're high, so they'll get it through that. So nitrogen is a crucial element that plays a vital role in plant development, and that's characterized by its ability to produce deep green color in the plants. So that's got that nice, lush, deep green color early on. It's going to fuel that rapid vegetative growth. It's going to enable plants to grow quickly. However, a nitrogen deficiency, if you don't have enough, it's going to look like a weak and spindly kind of plant. You might have some pale or yellowish foliage and the underside of the leaves, on the underside of the leaves, sorry. And then that's going to result in an overall stunted appearance of the plant. So it'll be pretty obvious if you need some nitrogen, and generally most vegetables tend to be low in that, especially as you get farther into the growing season, or we get into the heat of the year. Now, phosphorus is another essential nutrient, and that stimulates robust plant growth, particularly in the early stages of growth. And it encourages the development of strong roots, supports rapid and vigorous seedling establishment, and accelerates the blooming and maturation process. So a lack of phosphorus can lead to stunted growth. It'll look like, the plants will be thin and have shortened stemmed. The leaves will take on kind of like a purplish hue to them. And those are going to be your indicators that you need a little more phosphorus in the soil. And then the third one is potassium, or also known as potash. And that plays a role in development, particularly in the ripening of the fruit. And so it's essential for maintaining overall plant health and enhancing disease resistance, which is good. Additionally, potassium is crucial for the production of plump and full seeds. A deficiency in potassium can be identified by the appearance of gray or brown edges on older leaves, indicating a lack of this essential nutrient. So the content of nitrogen, phosphorus, the NPK on the bag is specified on the fertilizer bag by these numbers, which is the 3, 1, and 5, with the 3 being nitrogen, phosphorus being, or phosphate being the 1, and 5 being the potash. So if you're looking for a fertilizer for your vegetables, that's what you're going to want to look at, is these macronutrients here. And then usually if you haven't done a soil test that recommended exactly what you need, you can just shoot for a balanced fertilizer. Something like a 10-10-10 is generally pretty safe to use. So looking at fertilizing in the garden here, I do want to say a few things that fertilizer can't compensate for. Because it's beneficial, but it can't fix a lot of issues, which is why we started out talking about soil. So it can't fix poor soil structure. It can't fix an undesirable soil pH, or a a soil that's got a lot of salt content in it. It's not gonna fix, if the seeds are bad, if they're old, if they have low germination rate, if it's not gonna fix diseased or unhealthy plants. And it's not gonna help if you're growing in an area that's competing with shade trees and tree roots. Um, so just keep those things in mind. Like just throwing down some fertilizer isn't the answer to high yields and or overall plant health. It's a whole combination of things, and it's just one more thing in that combination. Um, and so you always want to start with adding some organic matter, and then you want to add your fertilizer in. And then you also want to make sure you've done a soil test first to know what your baseline is and what you're adding. So a couple fertilizer types here. Options that you'll have when you go to the store is organic, um, which is derived from plant and animal or mined mineral sources. Organic fertilizers typically have lower nutrient concentrations than synthetic fertilizers, and larger quantities need to meet it requires larger quantities to meet the nutrient demands, which makes them a little more costly upfront, especially if your soil is pretty low in something like nitrogen. So it can be a little costly, but overall will supply the same. And then synthetic is derived from a combo of mined rock and lab synthesized or purified nutrients. They're a little cheaper and they are more efficient in delivering larger amounts of nutrients to the soil in one shot. So a couple options there, obviously whatever your preference is, and whatever fits your wallet better. So talking a little bit about how to apply that fertilizer, right? So there's a couple options, especially for vegetable gardening. There's row application, broadcast, starter solution, side dressing, and foliar feeding. So row application is for efficient fertilization. You do that in the garden rows, and you apply about 1 to 2 pounds of balanced fertilizer per 100 feet. And you do this by digging a 2 to 3 inch trench on each side of the row and sprinkle half the fertilizer in each, then cover with soil and plant. And so it sounds a little complicated, but it works pretty well, and it works well for transplants or hilled planted crops like tomatoes and cucumbers. Um, and with those, you'll place 2 tablespoons of fertilizer 2 to 3 inches below the roots or seeds, and then cover the soil before planting. So that's row application. And then you have, sorry, let me come here. And then you have broadcasting, kind of like you would broadcast your grass, right? With a hand spreader, because row application be kind of labor intensive. So you could use that broadcast as an alternative, and you would apply about 2 or 3 pounds per 100 square feet, spread that evenly, and then mix it into the soil before you plant. And then we have like a starter solution for transplanted vegetables like tomatoes, peppers, eggplant, or cabbage. You'll add that starter fertilizer to the water when planting to help them establish a little quicker. And then commercial starter fertilizers are water soluble usually. You can get those in the store. And then just be sure to follow the label instructions because you don't want to add too much and burn the plant roots. And then side dressing, which is pretty common in for vegetables and probably the most common. It's done because nitrogen can leach from the soil, especially in sandy soils or during heavy rainfall. And so side dressing is applying nitrogen fertilizer alongside the plant rows. Sorry, I was pulling my picture up here. So you can kind of see along the sides of the plant rows here is where it's being put out, and that's going to help replenish the nitrogen. So you would apply that like you're going to split your nitrogen application up, and you're going to apply half of that at planting and then another half halfway through the growing season as they need more nitrogen. And so we've got a fruit picture here. We're not talking about fruit today, but that's how you would do it if you had a fruit tree. And then this one to the right here is how you would do it in your vegetable garden in between your rows there. So I put together this little chart just to show kind of quickly grouping vegetables by families and their nitrogen needs, and how you can increase your yield by applying nitrogen when they need it. Um, so let's look a little closer at each one of these. So in the Brassica family, which is going to be your arugula, bok choy, broccoli, things like that, their pH preference is between the 6.0 and 7.0 range. Their nitrogen needs are pretty high. They're heavy feeders and require a significant amount during rapid growth and development. And so you're going to apply that nitrogen when the plants are half grown. And then you only need to apply that nitrogen one time. And that can be at planting. Their water needs also are pretty high, so be sure to water consistently and evenly throughout the entire growing season when you're growing these Brassica crops. And that should give you a pretty good overall improved yield on your crops there. So allium family, chives, garlic, leeks, onions, shallots, things like that. I'll be honest, I have not had great success with these. Um, and you know, in doing this, I was realizing I probably wasn't fertilizing enough. I was really only fertilizing twice when I've done these, and so you know, you always learn something new every time you do something, right? Uh, so their pH preference is between 6.0 and 7.0, and their nitrogen needs are pretty high. And you need to apply that fertilizer broken up 4 different times. So you're going to apply it once, and then you're at planting, and then every 3 weeks after planting. I'm sorry, apply 3 weeks after planting, and then you're going to repeat that every 2 to 3 weeks until the bulb enlargement. And then you don't need to apply any more nitrogen when the bulbs begin to form. Their water needs are also pretty high, and the crucial time to make sure that you're applying good, even, consistent watering is when those bulbs do start to enlarge. And then we have the tomato family, eggplant, peppers, tomatoes, tomatillos, tomatoes. We grew a lot of eggplant here last year at the extension office in Sedgwick County. It was awesome. Lots of cool different varieties of eggplants out there if you're into that. I know that's not everyone's favorite vegetable, but I love them. I think they're great and good flavor if you know how to cook them up. So their pH preference is 5.5 to 7.5, and their nitrogen needs are kind of medium. And again, their timing, you want to apply 3 times throughout the growing season. And that's going to be, first time is going to be at planting. Second time is going to be when fruit is almost ready for harvest. And then that third time after picking the first ripe fruit, you're going to apply again. So pretty heavy feeders need to have that broken out 3 different times through the growing season. And then they have pretty high water needs as well. So timing is important. Make sure you're applying good, even, consistent water during early flowering, so that they get pollinated and they're open, and then fruits at fruit set, and then again at fruit enlargement. So these are pretty high water need crops here. And we'll talk a little bit more about irrigation and how to make that easier on these high water needs crops later on. So cucurbit family, bitter melon, cantaloupe, cucumbers, gourds, honeydew, pumpkin, squash, all those good things, all those big viney crops, right? Your pH preference is a little lower at 5.5 to 7.5. That's a pretty big range. So depending on what you're growing, make sure to do a little research on what that particular, if it's bitter melon or pumpkin, you know, see what pH range that plant wants to be in. Their nitrogen needs are actually pretty low. So their pumpkins are fun to grow because they don't really need too much love, especially on the fertilizer realm. So you're gonna apply that fertilizer one time. And that's when the plants, after you plant it, and that's when you apply it, is when the plants begin to actually vine out. And then their water needs are also kind of low. So just apply consistently during that flowering and fruiting period of development. And then the legume family, beans, edamame, peas, things like that, their pH reference is in that range of 5.4 to 7.5 again. Nitrogen needs are low to none. They don't need any extra nitrogen because um, they have that unique ability to fix atmospheric nitrogen themselves anyway. So that's a process that's made possible by the presence of nitrogen fixing bacteria, and that lives in symbiosis with the legume plants in its root nodules. So that's why you don't need to add extra nitrogen to these plants. Um, if you do feel the need to add a little bit, don't go overboard as you can easily stunt the plants with too much nitrogen. And then their water needs are pretty low, medium. And then with the application timing being crucial at flowering and seed enlargement. And then last one here, we have grass families. So corn, sweet corn, 5.5 to 7.5 pH preferred range. Water needs are high. And you're going to apply that, during silking, tasseling, and ear development. So just kind of always. And then nitrogen needs are pretty high, and you'll apply that one time, and that's when the plants have about 8 to 10 leaves. So we'll get into talking about watering here. So some factors affecting watering needs, soil type, we talked a lot about soil, so we're just skim over this kind of quickly. Sandy's going to dry out quick, clay is going to retain more water, and loam's going to have a moderate balance of holding and releasing water. Um, Things to think about too is like the plant size. So the larger your plant, the larger the root system, and that's going to increase your water needs. And then weather conditions, things like, temperature, humidity, wind. We've had a lot of wind lately. It's been wild. It's been awful. I'm over it. But that dries the soil out quite a bit faster. And so this little chart in the middle here is again from the Kansas Garden Guide, just a nice quick look to tell you, give you a reference of how much water to apply based off of what type of soil you potentially have. So some just common general watering needs here. Cool season crops have a little shallower of a root system than warm season crops, so they're not going to need as much water. You want to water when the top 2 to 4 inches of soil are dry, and ensure that at least 6 to 8 inches of moisture, it's gone down 6 to 8 inches with 1 to 2 inches of water. Direct seeded crops need frequent shallow watering until established. And then your transplants are going to need 1.5 to about 1 cup at planting. As the weather gets warmer and we increase to 85 degrees, water clay soils weekly, try to water loam soils every 5 to 7 days. And sandy soils are going to need it a little more often, at about twice a week. And then keep in mind, adjust your watering based on what's happening outside. So with the weather, if it's, been like it has been lately and it's been windy every day, 25-mile-an-hour winds with 45-mile-an-hour wind gusts, you may have to water a little more. Also keep up with the plant growth and their development. So again, as that root size, the plant size increases, that root size increases, and then they're just going to need more water as they grow on. Your soil type, and then, just weather conditions. As it gets hotter and drier, they're just going to need more water. Here's another great chart from the Kansas Garden Guide here. This is how much water you should effectively apply for certain rooting depths. So I just wanted to show this, that's in there. You can look a little more at that. If you're curious, shallow roots are about 6 to 12 inches, moderate roots are 8 to 24 inches, and then deeper over 24. And so you can use that to kind of gauge how much water and how deeply you need to be applying your water as well. And then be timely in your application. So, we're experiencing a drought here in Sedgwick County, and I know other parts of Kansas are as well. So apply timely so that you're applying when the plants need it most, without wasting water. And then that's also going to help increase your yields because you'll be following along their growth line and giving it to them at a very crucial time when they need it. So this is another little chart from the Kansas Garden Guide here, that shows what the critical times of water needs are during each crop's life cycle. And then application methods, so drip or trickle irrigation, super common. There are a couple different kinds of systems here. You've got low pressure drip systems, which are drip tape with emitters spaced at intervals. And those require a pressure regulator to control water pressure between 6 to 20 psi. Whereas a high pressure drip system, they have pressure compensating emitters. They're good for small pots, home gardens, and perennial crops, and they operate at 30 to 50 psi, which is pretty typical of city water supplies. And then another option is overhead sprinklers. So that can be a pretty cost-effective method when watering large areas of diverse crops. However, there is a drawback on, like, you can have high water evaporation on hot, windy days. I we've all seen that sprinkler running out on a 25-mile-an-hour windy day and just blowing everywhere. So some things you can do to try to mitigate losing all that water from evaporation or just blowing away in general is to adjust the droplet size of the water so that it's actually getting past the plant, the canopy of the plant, and down into the soil, into the roots. So I just wanted to show another chart here real quick about some of the critical times to apply water to specific crops. And so we've already gone through these, but brassicas, brassicas, you want to apply basically continuously. Alliums, you want to apply at bulb enlargement. The tomato family during early flowering, fruit set, and enlargement. Cucurbits during flowering and fruit development. Legumes at flowering and seed enlargement. And grass at silking, tasseling, and ear development. We'll touch a little bit on just a few last tips and things to do that'll help improve your yields overall. So mulch. Mulching your plants, mulching your beds, that's going to help conserve water. It's going to control weed growth. It's going to help manage soil temperature and reduce disease spread. And controlling all of those things is going to increase your yield. It's going to mean that your plants aren't competing for other competing with other plants or other weather conditions for nutrients. And so there are a couple different mulch options. You've got organic options like compost, straw, leaves, and grass clippings. Plastic is also an option. It comes in a variety of colors for different needs. It must directly contact the soil to maximize warming. So it's really useful in the fall or in the late winter to heat up soil. For spring plantings, and then it does require a drip irrigation system be installed underneath it before you apply it. And then disposal after use can be a little challenging and some difficult to throw away all that plastic as well. It's not terribly reusable. But a reusable option is weed barrier fabric that can be reused from year to year. So suppressing weeds, weeds are, they're going to compete with vegetables for water, nutrients, and space. So it's smart to get rid of those weeds as fast as you can. There are herbicides that exist, but they're difficult to use without harming your crops. So mulching, hand weeding, and cultivation are really kind of the key options there for weed control in a vegetable garden. And then options for preventing weed growth and seed production that reduces further problems. So preventing weed growth, that's going to be done through your mulching or putting down some sort of cover, like plastic cover. So that's just through exclusion, basically. Also, no-till falls into that as well. If you're not turning over the soil, then you're not exposing that seed bank sitting in the soil underneath the surface there and exposing those to sunlight and water where they're going to germinate. And then prioritize removing weeds near the crops, then between rows, and then within the perimeter, those weeds are a little less critical, but removing them nearest the crop so they don't directly compete for water, nutrients, and space is the most important. And then we're going to talk about preventing and managing pests and diseases here. And we're not going to get deep into this, so I'm just going to talk about the benefits of making sure you're doing this. So as you're getting into the hot season and you're starting to see pests come out looking for food, which is the plants you want, and they're going to reduce your yield. So scouting for them, being aware of when you usually get them and trying to get ahead of it, it's going to help reduce damage. That's going to prevent also competition. It's going to improve your fruit quality. It's going to enhance your resilience, and sustaining long-term productivity is another benefit of that. So I know I went through a lot. I think I'm okay on time here. We'll have time for a few questions. But just to summarize, if you're looking to increase your yield, start with choosing high-performing varieties suited to your garden. Then think about your soil, improve that soil health with organic matter and other management strategies. Then look at what fertilizer to use once they're in the ground. So fertilize based on the crops that are needed to, and avoid under feeding. And then water wisely, like we talked about. Deep and consistent waterings at the right time are going to lead to stronger plants. And then suppress weeds and manage pests to reduce competition and stress. So just the healthier your plants, the higher your yields are going to be. And hopefully all these tips will get you there and have you help have you have a successful crop this growing season. So that's all I have for today. Again, my name is Abbey Draut. I'm a horticulture agent here in Sedgwick County, and there's my contact info.
Wonderful presentation, Abby. Just a reminder, if you have a question that you would like to ask Abby, please leave it in the Q&A section. We have quite a bit of questions. So let's start. Can you use a hoe to control weeds, or do you need to dig the entire weed up?
If they're just seedlings, yes, you can use a hoe.
Okay. Are there issues with commercially available mill organite or flower beds? I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure how to answer that one. I'm not aware of any issues, but I also have not looked into that.
Mm-hmm. It's fine. And then what pest control do you recommend?
In the garden for any
Yes.
pest? Okay. Scouting, I would say, is your number one best bet, and get familiar with when they come out. So if you know in your garden that you're going to get squash bug in late May or June, start scouting, early May, and really look for them. And then it just depends on the crop too. I mean, you're not going to pick off every aphid, but if you can capture those squash bugs when you see them, or start to pull them off, put them in a bucket of soapy water and get rid of them that way. Like I mentioned, there aren't a lot of options for herbicide management, but there are some options for pesticide management. But if you're going organic, then it kind of limits what you can spray. And so it's definitely a fine line between your needs and your outcomes for your plants and your fruit, and how you want to manage pests inside your garden.
Okay. Okay, this one's a bit of a long one. I have a sub-irrigated 4x8 beds. So I cannot use most organic matter like compost because it waterlogs the potting soil. What are your thoughts on using just worm castings as fertilizer applied multiple times throughout the growing season?
I would I would do a soil test, and if you're using potting soil, like mostly peat moss, is that what they're saying? Um,
Uh, I wasn't sure about that one.
yeah, I'm not real sure how to answer that one either in a raised bed. And I understand what they're saying because they can't till it in or work it in very well if they have it's sub-irrigated. And then it gets waterlogged. So, um, earthworm castings, they have a pretty, I can't remember exactly what they have. They have pretty low NPK, so probably would be all right, but definitely try to do a soil test.
Wonderful. Is it the bacteria that fix nitrogen in legumes present in the seed, or is it the bacteria just present in all soils and the legumes plants can pick it up? That was a pretty good one.
I'm not sure. I'll have to do some research on that one.
Okay, fair enough. Um,
Right, I'm gonna
let's
jump
see.
in
Oh,
here
yeah.
as it's 1 o'clock. And so we're gonna wrap up for the day. We do typically have more questions than we have time for, but we'll be sure to link several articles related to this session on our website. And again, all the different resources we put in the chat throughout the presentation will also be linked. We hope that these resources will help to answer all of your questions, but if you do need additional information, please contact your local K-State Extension office. Once again, thank you so much for joining us for the K-State Garden Hour series hosted by K-State Research and Extension. We're so glad you could be here today to learn about increasing crop yields, and thank you so much, Abby, for this wonderful presentation. We're excited to continue offering this webinar into 2025, so be sure to watch your email for more details. And you can visit the K-State Garden Hour website to view recorded Garden Hour archive or to make a tax-deductible donation to support the continuation of this webinar series. This session was recorded and it will be posted on the website by tomorrow afternoon. After this webinar ends today, you will receive a prompt to take an evaluation survey. And please fill this out. We would greatly appreciate your feedback, and we really do read through all of the surveys that we get back. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at gardenhour@ksu.edu. We'll throw that email in the chat. Thank you again, and we hope that you continue to tune in for the first Wednesday of each month. Have a great rest of your week.